Hello, everybody. My name is Allie Morgan. I am from the Campo Family YMCA here in Tampa, Florida. I will be giving you your class today. It is going to be working with 5 to 12-year-olds. This is one of the classes I've taught up at Blue Ridge for this would have been my third year teaching it. I hope you guys can use this information within your clubs and within your home YMCAs, and I'm excited to be able to share this information with you today. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we're first going to get started with our 3 stages of motor development. This is important to talk about what these are first because this is going to help us better understand all of the different age groups we're going to talk about. The first stage of motor development is cognitive. So in a cognitive stage, you're going to determine what the objective of the skill is. It also relies on visual cues and error to learn the task. These learners are easily distracted. So it is best to accommodate the environmental factors to minimize these distractions. If someone is in a cognitive motor development, they are what we call a beginner. So typically there's going to be our younger friends in our programs. The next stage of motor development is associative. These learners better understand the task and demonstrate a more refined performance of the skill. They are typically able to focus more on how to complete the task, making a performance more consistent rather than just getting lucky when they are performing the task or the skill. Our autonomic is our last stage of motor development. These learners have mastered the skill and can perform skill with little to no thought. They can also be referred to as automatic. So they're going to automatically perform this skill or this task. They know it very well. It can be hard to change the process of the skill at this point without impacting the success. The best way to kind of explain that is you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can, but it's going to be more difficult to do so. When you're in the autonomic stage, you are typically older and you've been playing the sport or participating in this activity for a long time now. So your skills are kind of set in how you've been doing them for a long time. The next thing we take into a large consideration when we're working with 5 to 12-year-olds in any capacity is going to be your material and your space selection. We need to make sure that when we are planning activities, we are making material selections that are appropriate. We are using the correct sports equipment for different sports that we're using. You're not going to use a soccer ball to teach them basketball. You need to make sure that you have the basketballs for that activity or you have all of the proper equipment. We also need to make sure that this equipment is working and is appropriate for that age we're with. What I mean by that is typically our younger friends in our programs have a different size basketball and or soccer ball for their age group versus the older kids. So we need to make sure that we have plenty of those materials that are appropriate for those ages. Also, that they're working. We would hate to go into a practice or an activity and you have the equipment, but none of it works. So now your plan is failing. So you need to check to make sure that those things are working before you start your practice and or your activity. When planning, we also have to make appropriate selections of space. This is a big one because this brings in a lot of safety concerns with some of the spaces that we're using for our different activities. For after school and camp programs, we make sure we're using areas that are safe for various activities like I just said. You want to make sure that you have adequate space outside for outside activities. Your inside space has inside type activities. If you have a big open basketball gym or an open gym area, you can be a little versatile with what you use in there because it is a big open space. Typically higher ceilings, larger areas. If you are in a group X type room or some type of multi-purpose room that is a little bit smaller, you can still play games and activities. You just have to make sure that they can fit within that space safely for those kids, and or if you're using equipment that it is appropriate to use inside or to use them in a game appropriately for indoors. Those are 2 very big things you need to take in consideration with working 5 to 12-year-olds. Talking about all of that leads me to SMART goals. I'm sure many of you have heard of SMART goals, whether in school, you've talked about them in your clubs. Now it's time to apply that to working with 5 to 12-year-olds. So just to review SMART goals, S, specific. It is a specific goal that you are doing or a specific plan that you are going with. Measurable. When we are instructing or coaching, so swim instructors, basketball, soccer, volleyball coaches, when we are teaching skills, we need to make sure that we can measure their success rate and measure their accuracy. You have to take this into account for all age groups. What you're looking for in a skill set for a 5 and 6-year-old is very different than what you're looking for when you're measuring those goals for an 11 and 12-year-old. So you need to know how to have these SMART goals for each and every age group, for each and every activity that you're completing. You also need to make sure that they're attainable. When they're coming to our programs and they're learning different skill sets, we want to make sure that they can attain them. We are not setting them up for failure. We're not going to set them up with something that they feel that they're never going to get. So they need to be attainable for these specific age groups. Realistic. Make sure they can happen. We are not going to have a 5-year-old dribbling a basketball up and down the court as a warm-up. That is not realistic for that age group. You might have them do more of a bounce catch, and you're going to set up cones that only takes up part of the court, but you're not going to have them dribbling a basketball a full court length. That is not realistic. So make sure that your goals and or programming that you're doing is realistic. It also needs to be time oriented. We need to have these plans set out. So if you have an hour-long practice or your activity is an hour long or even 45 minutes long, everything that you're doing should help that time orientedness happen. We don't want to spend too much time on one thing when you have a list of skills we need to be working on. Our older kids, your being time oriented can help to make sure you have a very efficient practice, that you are getting through everything you need to. Our younger friends in our programming, time orientedness, you're going to need a lot of time for them to practice the skills that you're teaching. So you may not have a long list of things you're doing in that practice, but again, if they are attainable and realistic and specific, you shouldn't run out of time. Or it also shouldn't go the opposite direction where they get through everything really, really fast and you have a bunch of extra time. So those are things you need to take in consideration as well. And these SMART goals will help you be able to, I'm going to go back a slide, help with this material and space selection. All of those go together very nicely. Okay. So types of feedbacks. The 4 I have listed on this page right now are very important for all age groups. When we are giving feedback, this essentially sets you up for how we are talking to the kids in our programs, whether it's camp or after school care or a sports program or swim lessons, anything that your Y offers. When we're giving feedback, this is how we're talking to them. So we're going to start with intrinsic feedback. It comes from within. Concerning the feeling of the movement, it's important for our autonomic learners. So remember, autonomic, those are going to be our older kids that have been doing programming for a very long time, and they understand what these skills should feel like and look like. An example is when you feel the balance during a handstand. So a person doing the handstand is going to be able to feel their balance is either on or off. Maybe I need to move my legs, tighten my core, shift a hand. Those are things that are all coming intrinsically. Extrinsically, it comes from an external source. An example is a teacher or a coach. So that's us. That's always going to be us. We are always going to be giving extrinsic feedback. This type is received by seeing and hearing and is important to support intrinsic feedback. So if back to the balance during a handstand, I might see that my participant keeps falling over during a handstand because her legs are not straight enough. They are going too far back or too far forward, so her balance is very off. I can see that, so I'm going to tell her, hey, tighten your core and that's going to help fix it. She's going to do that. Intrinsically, she's going to get feedback because now she knows what it feels like to complete this skill correctly. Going back to extrinsic feedback, I'm going to keep reading. This type of feedback is important for cognitive and beginners. So those are our younger ones. And extrinsic feedback can be positive or negative. When I say negative, we're not talking down to them. I will get to negative feedback in just a few minutes, but just keep that in mind that when we say negative feedback, we're not talking down to our participants. Positive feedback is received when a movement is performed correctly and is used to reinforce action. You can use positive feedback during summer camp and after school care. If you're playing a game and you see a camper do the action in the game correctly and you want others to be able to follow up and see what they're doing, you're going to make this positive feedback very loud, very proud. Yes, you got it. That's right. Do it like that every time. That is that positive feedback. Negative feedback, like I said before, we are not going to talk down to them, but we are going to give them a feedback that is going to help them prevent from doing a skill incorrectly. So negative feedback is almost just correcting what they were doing. We want to say, hey, you need to be doing XYZ to make this skill better. And we need to do it because they could get hurt. You know, that's incorrectly. You could get, if you're playing a sport, you know, that's how you get a foul. Too many fouls, you could be out of the game, different things like that. Explain the negative feedback that you're giving it to them. There are additional types of feedback. The 4 that are listed on this page are typically going to be for our autonomic learners. Some of this can be used for our associative learners. The associative ones are kind of this middle age range where like they have some skill sets, we're still tweaking on things. They're moving towards the autonomic stage of development. And we're most definitely going to give these types of feedback to our autonomics because it's on a higher level of thinking when we're doing this. So knowledge of performance concerns the quality of movement based on techniques. Tell us why the movement was correct or incorrect. Again, you're kind of explaining what they were doing correct or wrong. Can be intrinsic or extrinsic, and it's important for our experienced participants. Knowledge of performance best examples I can give are from dance and gymnastics. So we want to always, I grew up dancing. We always wanted to know what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong. Knowledge of the performance literally in itself. Yes, you did this correctly. On beat, off beat, point your feet, that kind of thing. Knowledge of results concerns the outcome of the movement based on the results. Was the movement successful or unsuccessful? It is intrinsic because it comes purely from the success of the movement. However, this can be positive or negative. So knowledge of results is strictly coming from those coaches and instructors and or counselors, whichever role you are fitting in when you are working with these 5 to 12-year-olds. You are telling them the result of their movement. Was it successful or unsuccessful? Concurrent feedback is received during the movement, both intrinsically and extrinsically. The best way to give an example of what concurrent feedback is if you guys can think about if you ever played sports or were on a team of any sort and your coach literally gave you feedback as you were performing the skill and or movement. That is concurrent feedback. It is happening while you are doing it. Terminal feedback is received when the movement is complete or after the training session. So terminal feedback is essentially you sitting your team down and kind of going over any kind of feedback, positive or negative, at the end of practice. So concurrent is in the middle of what they're doing, and terminal is going to be essentially at the end of your practice. All 4 of these types of feedbacks can intermingle. Just realize that if you're giving knowledge of results and concurrent feedback and terminal feedback and even knowledge of performance, this is going to be for our autonomic learners, our older friends in our programming that have an understanding of what these skills should be and how to execute them. Okay. So these next several slides are going to be all about the different age groups. I have grouped them in the same way that I would talk about them in our class at Blue Ridge. So first we would typically start with our 5 and 6-year-olds. A lot of these slides is compiled information from the last years as well. This is largely a discussion-based section. So starting with 5 and 6-year-olds, these are all going to be our cognitive learners. Something that I always tell everyone about our 5 and 6-year-olds is this is typically the first time they're going to do anything. Their first swim lesson, their first time playing sports, their first time coming to camp. A 5 and 6-year-old is also in kindergarten. So it could be the first time that they're ever attending an after-school program and or have gone to school. So we are getting them for the very first time, and we have to assume that they know nothing about our rules, procedures, and expectations. You have to teach all of them. They need concise directions, so that is easy steps to follow. During our summer camp training this summer at my Y, going over transitions, there's lots of questions that came from our counselors about transitioning from groups to groups and kids getting confused. And I was like, I'm going to set it up like this for you. And I'm going to tell you guys the same thing. You need to give them 1 or 2 steps of instructions. You do not move forward until those 2-step instructions have been completed for the whole group. Do things as a group with them. So for transitions, if you're going from, say, the basketball gym to your outside field, you're going to line them up, prep them where we're going. Hey guys, we're leaving this area and we're now going to the outside field. Walk to the outside field. If you have a location where they need to put their stuff, say there is a set of benches and that's where your group needs to put their backpacks. You will tell them, hey guys, go put your backpacks on the benches and then come sit on this line right here if there's a line on the field. Give them a specific area that they need to sit. Don't just tell them to go sit on the field. You could almost have an entire field for them to sit on. Tell them where to sit. So I've told you to put your backpacks on the benches and I've told you to sit on this line. You will repeat those directions multiple times as this group is doing it, and then you will wait to give further instructions until both of those things have been completed. Because once they've all seated in the area and they have none of their personal belongings, that would count as a distraction. Then you can move forward into giving directions for whatever is coming next. If it's directions for games or you're gonna be running a practice with them, whatever the case is, you give them a few steps at a time. If you're doing something more like arts and crafts, again, you're going to give them easy instructions and you're going to wait for them to finish them. We had a craft the other day in camp that involved coloring a picture, and then we had to cut out the different pictures and then we were gluing them separately on a different piece of paper to make kind of like a scenery to go with our themed week. You'll explain all of the steps to them, but you will have them perform them easily in smaller steps. So first you would have everyone color the pictures. Once your group's finished coloring, then you say, okay, now everyone, this is the time for us to cut them out. And then you wait, and then you give them all scissors and they cut everything out. Then you would have them glue onto that piece of paper to make the scenery for all the pictures. Let them have some time to do that, but those are easy steps. Don't say, all right, guys, you're gonna color, cut, and glue, and then give them all the materials. It's not gonna work out. Never has. When we are doing swim lessons and like actual programming with them or sports programming, you need to let them know that mistakes are going to be made and it's totally okay. We as adults make mistakes and no one's perfect. They're cognitive learners and they are learning everything, soaking it up. Mistakes are going to happen. They're okay. We're going to move forward from them. The younger ones definitely get very upset when they see that they've made a mistake or what they're doing doesn't look like everybody else. Let them know that it's okay and reassure them and help them move forward. You as the instructor need to have a lot of patience with this group. They're easily distracted. They ask lots of questions. They won't even ask questions. They'll give you random thoughts. So just have a lot of patience with this group with whatever activity and or programming you're doing with them. Discipline with this group. It needs to be handled intentionally. So you're gonna get on their level. You might even pull them aside from the group. You're going to talk with them, not at them, and you're going to address it quickly. The biggest thing with this group is you see something at the beginning of your programming and you address it at the end, they're going to completely forget that they've done something wrong. because their time and space conception is very short. So as soon as you see it, you need to handle it. This is the biggest piece of advice I can give for working with the 5 to 6-year-olds is that you're going to repeat yourself a lot. And it's okay, and you should expect to repeat yourself a lot. They need constant instruction and direction. That is totally normal for this group. Okay, our 7 and 8-year-olds, a lot of this information is just building from 5 to 6. So this age group is cognitive and moving towards that associative. So maybe they've played 1 or 2 sessions of a sport. Maybe they've had, 1 year of swim lessons and now a whole year has passed because they only take swim lessons in the summer. So it's the second summer that they're coming back. They're going to pick up on things easy, and then you're going to keep that skill building. So the whole associative area of motor development is just fine tuning and moving to where it's going to happen automatically. They can combine simple tasks into a single action. So a great example is basketball. When you're 5 and 6 and younger and you're learning basketball, explaining what dribbling is to them, it's a bounce and catch, bounce and catch. And then you move to having it a constant motion where you're not physically catching the ball. It's just a down, up, and then you're going to move to one hand. Those are all simple tasks they're combining to where they're finally dribbling how we would in a basketball game, and then you're going to have them start moving around while they're dribbling. Maybe they'll go from cone to cone, or the foul line to the other foul line. They're not moving up and down the court just yet, but you are putting things together for single actions. They still need concise directions, but they can handle more directions at one time. You are still going to be very intentional with your directions as well. You're going to tell them exactly what you want them to do. And they can handle probably 3 to 4 step directions without too much room for error, as long as they're concise and intentional. Discipline, you're still going to get down on the child's level. You're still going to address it quickly. When they're 7 and 8 years old, you're going to want to ask them a little more questioning. Ask them more questions on, well, what happened? Can you tell me what happened? Why do you think this happened? What was making you feel this way? Let them be able to tell you different things. And you're also going to give warning for future incidents. And that can be done in one of 2 ways. One is you're going to let them know if they break a rule. So they stole equipment from the equipment bag when we weren't playing that activity. Okay, if you do that again, you're going to have to sit out around in this next game. You're not going to be able to. We weren't using that equipment then, and it needs to stay where it is so we all stay safe. Those kind of things. You let them know what can happen if they repeat that action. The other way we handle warning for future events is if a camper is telling you that someone has hurt their feelings or someone made them mad, different things like that. So how we would address it then is when someone makes you feel that way, you immediately need to come get me. You almost kind of give them strategies to help them work through their feelings, that kind of information. So that is the 2 ways we would give warning for future incidents. Okay, I have our 9 and 10-year-olds and our 11 and 12-year-olds on the same page. I have them side by side for a reason. It is a lot of overlapping information. So our 9 and 10-year-olds are definitely associative, and some are autonomic. You potentially have a 9 or 10-year-old that this is their first time coming to any kind of programming. They might be 10 and they discover they love basketball, so now they're coming to the Y to learn how to play. And you also have other 10-year-olds that have been playing basketball at your YMCA for 3 years now. So you're going to have both of those. But typically they're older, they pick up on things faster. So they're already going to kind of be in this associative stage, moving to autonomic. You will start to see in the 9 and 10-year-old group beginning stages of maturity, definitely differences between boys and girls maturity-wise. They definitely handle things a little bit differently. They can kind of validate their feelings or validate what might be going on with them a little easier. They can handle more directions at once, and their directions can be a little vague because they have an understanding that they know what some of these expectations are. They've been in school, they've been in other programming before, maybe you've had them in your YMCA since they were very, very little. So they have these expectations. So you can kind of give vague directions or instructions on what's going to be going on. Discipline. Definitely ask questions on behavior, talk about what was done, how to fix it, what we can do to prevent it in the future. Always should be handled quickly. But when they get a little bit older, a lot of the discipline issues come from unsportsmanlike conduct, someone's annoying me, cliquey friend groups, things like that. They made me feel this way. They made me do it because they made me mad. That kind of stuff is where we start to see our discipline issues happen, 9 moving forward to our 12-year-olds. So I like to go back and check on them or check on them after the activity. If you had to address something a few hours later, hey, are you feeling better? Like, do you think you're having a better day now? You know, is there anything else I can do to help you kind of work through this? Anything like that. You want to check up on them so they know that you're listening to them. 11 and 12-year-olds, they are mostly autonomic. Again, very rarely that you're going to have 11 and 12-year-old coming to programming for the first time. So they're definitely going to be in an autonomic stage. They know what they should be doing. They know how the skill should be performed. There are going to be larger differences in maturity levels, definitely between boys and girls. This also has a lot of dealings with exposure in different environmental settings. If they're a younger sibling versus an older sibling, all of that stuff comes into play when you're seeing these different maturity levels. And we as staff need to recognize that and kind of handle how to talk to them about various things. Our 11 and 12-year-olds should definitely be able to follow multi-step directions without much room for error. Directions can be vague with the understanding that they know expectations. They've definitely been in school for a long time. They know basic and general rules that are followed everywhere. Discipline, I have it the exact same thing that I have for our 9 and 10-year-olds. I handle them the same way. You're going to ask questions on the behavior, talk about what was done, how to fix it, how to prevent it, make sure it's done quickly. With the older kids, you don't want things lingering because it could just morph into this larger fire that's going to evolve and evolve and evolve. We want to squash the issues. And again, check on them later on during the day. That's really, you can definitely check on them at the end of a sports practice if something happened, but if before and after school care and summer camp, you have larger amounts of time with them, definitely go back and check up on them and kind of just see how they're doing. This last slide is just my last bits of advice for anybody working with these age groups. You need to be excited when you work with kids. If you are excited, the kids will be excited. If you're not feeling it, the kids aren't going to feel it, and they're going to know. They pick up on that. So just be excited. Always be excited when you're giving directions and playing a game. Everything can be new, fun, and exciting. It's very easy to do it that way. You need to always be prepared, and you need to have backup plans. This could include having extra activities or rainy day plans. I live in Florida. It practically rains every day at 3 o'clock. And then we also have thundering and lightning about 4:30 halfway through sign out time. So we are always prepared with a rainy day schedule. We can easily transition from outside activities to inside activities and having all of our supplies there and ready to go for us. We as adults need to kind of be able to go with the flow. I personally sometimes have a hard time dealing with change, but I know that when I'm working with kids, I need to be able to go with the flow. Plans change, things happen in our building, other meetings are happening, and our conference room is taken. So now we're having a change where a group eats lunch. That goes back to having backup plans. If you have a backup plan, you're still going to be able to go with the flow because now you're just kind of going from the box A to box B with whatever plan is there. And you need to have fun yourself. If we're working with 5 to 12-year-olds, I mean, these are young kids and they're coming for an experience with the Y in many different things. So you need to be having fun with what you're doing. Thank you so much for attending Working with 5 to 12-year-olds. And I hope, again, you guys can take all of this knowledge and just soak it up and become better leaders yourself, or be able to share this with anybody you work programming with. And make sure you guys come back tonight and see the honor leader that will be on this evening, and check out their Insta takeover and all their fun facts that they have for you guys. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.